Taliban leaders are making new threats against U.S. troops in Afghanistan after President Trump canceled secret peace talks with the militants and Afghan leaders. Right now, negotiations to end the nearly 18-year conflict and bring U.S. troops home are in turmoil. Charlie D'Agata is in Kabul, Afghanistan's capital. Charlie, what's the Afghan government saying this morning?
Well, Anthony, it was the announcement of the cancellation that took everybody by surprise here, including the Taliban, who warned that it would lead to the loss of more American lives. Talks between the U.S. and the Taliban seemed on the verge of a breakthrough until it all fell apart. President Trump tweeting that he called off peace negotiations in the wake of last week's Taliban attack that killed a U.S. service member and at least 11 others, which caught President Ghani's government here on the back foot. Are peace talks continuing?
We don't think so at this stage.
And that other bombshell, that Taliban leaders and separately the president of Afghanistan were going to secretly meet at Camp David. We caught up with presidential spokesman Sadiq Siddiqui. We were looking at a meeting where we're going to have President Ghani and representatives of the Taliban and President Trump at Camp David, a very important place. That's huge.
Well, I don't know. I can't comment on that right now. I don't have that much detail of any meeting that could have happened in Camp David.
Maybe because it was supposed to be a secret. Camp David, the country retreat where presidents down the years have invited world leaders to broker some of history's most famous peace deals. The president's decision to host the Taliban there on the eve of the anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks has angered members of his own party. Here, the Taliban's use of violence, like suicide bombings and assaults, as a tool for negotiating peace, now only promises to prolong the war. Now, the president's spokesman told us there was actually some relief that those talks were canceled. It shows you can't talk to the Taliban while they're on the attack, and they can't be trusted. Tony?
Charlie D'Agata for us in Kabul. Charlie, thank you very much. The United States went to war in Afghanistan 18 years ago this month, and we want to offer some context to what is America's longest war. About 14,000 American troops are still in the country, and over the course of the war, more than 2,400 U.S. servicemen and women have died there. And the U.S. still has spent more than $2 trillion. So the big question, how did we get to right now? Well, 7 days after the 9/11 attacks, President George W. Bush signed a resolution authorizing the use of force against those responsible for 9/11, al-Qaeda, with the support of the Taliban, who ran Afghanistan at the time. 19 days later, the U.S. launched its first airstrikes on Afghanistan, and the Taliban government quickly fell. But the Taliban had a resurgence in 2006, taking advantage of weak Afghan government leadership and launching hundreds of attacks each month. President Obama took office in 2009 and ordered a troop surge to handle the violence. Afghan security forces took over the war in 2014, but thousands of U.S. troops remain due to continuing instability. Since then, the Taliban has steadily gained more power and more territory. Taliban militants now control more of Afghanistan than at any time since 2001, when the U.S. invasion happened, giving them more leverage at a crucial time and a crucial seat at the negotiating table.
And that's where we begin. Senior foreign affairs correspondent and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan is at the White House with more on that part of the story. Margaret, the big question now is, why was this meeting really canceled?
Well, good morning, Gayle. I'm told by both U.S. officials and senior Afghan officials that the reason goes deeper than the president's tweet, which claimed it was all due to that deadly bombing on Thursday. Keep in mind, negotiators went back into talks right after that bombing, and neither side had actually agreed to a ceasefire. A senior administration official I spoke with told me it did, though, become apparent that the Taliban negotiators at the table did not have full command and control of the fighters on the ground who carried out that attack. In addition, key details of the agreement were still unfinished. The Taliban still has ties to al-Qaeda, according to U.S. intelligence. That's key. The Taliban did publicly say that they refused to travel until a deal was signed. And Secretary of State Pompeo told me yesterday on Face the Nation that there was confusion on this point. But he did believe that the Taliban did intend and they planned to have them show up at Camp David. You also have to keep in mind there's a backdrop of disagreement within the Trump administration itself over whether that drawdown in U.S. troops from 14,000 down to 8,600, which is what the president previously announced, needs to happen with an agreement or can happen without one.
Margaret, there always seems to be more to the story than what the president tweets. So what happens now?
That's the big question. Secretary Pompeo said the president will have to make a decision on force posture. That means, is he going to revisit his previously announced decision to take the number of U.S. troops down from 14,000 to 8,600? He said he was going to do so around the same time that the Taliban and the Afghan government received their invitations to Camp David. So new circumstances, does that change? Pompeo said he didn't know the answer to that yet. He did leave the door open to returning to talks, but that's going to be really tough. The one constant, Gayle, that we hear from both President Trump and every single Democrat running for the nomination in 2020 is that they want to end U.S. involvement in this war. So for the Taliban, this may just be a matter of waiting. And as Charlie said, it will continue to be deadly. The Taliban said they will use violence to gain leverage.
All right, Margaret, the world is watching. Thank you very much.